Special edition of Darker Things 20 Years of Lies. This is your host, Devious Dave Rose. Almost 20 years to the day that the world experienced one of the worst terrorist acts ever. So, before we begin today's show, let's start off by showing our gratitude and appreciation for all those that have chosen to spend their time with us here today. We have Derailed News and Podcasts. We've got Seaman, Mrs. Foulmouth Ken, J-Diz, Travis TLC, the man with two first names, Steve Callan, and I'm sure many more will start to filter in as well. So there's obviously quite a lot to discuss, 20 years worth basically, more. And because there's just so much to cover, I won't be able to cover it all. I will try my best to cover some of the most important points, Shout out to Leaping Lizard, who's in the chat. And I will be allowing for calls to come in if anyone would like to discuss the topics that have been presented on today's show. So let's start off by talking about the fact that tomorrow marks 20 years since this attack. And, well, we've seen our lives, in my opinion, change for the worst because we've lost a lot of liberties because of supposed threats, and we've seen a massive militarization of the police, the suspensions of certain rights and freedoms. Shout out to Bam in the chat. And essentially a lot of coercion for us to accept additional bureaucrats and additional government departments to handle something that, considering the trillions that are spent by the American military-industrial complex, this issue should never have occurred in the first place. But that's the thing, though. It was allowed to happen. And there are many elements within both government and intelligence industries that were in on it. In fact, there is massive amounts of predictive programming that essentially established since the 70s that the WTC was a target. Now, if you understand Freemasonry, you understand that twin columns are a very important thing in Freemasonry. And they basically go by two different names, Boaz and Yachin, or Yakin, depending on your pronunciation. And they supposedly stood on the porch of Solomon's temple. Freemasons do, I wouldn't say worship Solomon, but they do hold him in high esteem because Hiram Abiff, supposedly the architect of his temple, was hired by him. And this means a lot when it comes to esotericism. So let me just now transition to a new screen here because there's a lot to go through. Let me just find out the right one here. I do apologize. Okay, let's start off with this. You'll have many pundits out there, aka shills, like Harsh Truth Frank, who says that nobody imagined that this could ever occur. Nobody could ever imagine that this would occur. That's false, blatantly. Not only had actual exercises gone on prior to the year 2001, the Amalgam Virgo 1 exercise, a drone missile hijacking attack during the beginning of June 2001, specifically put these tactics in play. So, not only were they well aware of this, because if you remember, there was, during this same time, warnings that were given to several government officials saying bin Laden intent to hit the World Trade Center with jet planes. And you might remember that interview with Secretary Rice, who in George Bush's administration said we could never have imagined this. Well, in fact, they did, and they planned for it. Afternoon Extreme Shaft? Yeah, that's right. It's the first jab, Travis, and it won't be the last. But anybody who says that we couldn't imagine this is either a moron or a liar. And it's all over the place, fully documented. There's also programs such as Able Danger. And the Able Danger operation that went down essentially in 2000, 2001, indicated that there was high probability of a terrorist attack, and they identified many individuals, including Mohammed Atta. They were also able to essentially confirm that these supposed 19 hijackers were all trained to fly in the United States, specifically in Pensacola, Florida, a place where there's a military base. And, well, it was admitted by those that trained them that they couldn't fly for shit, that they didn't even understand how they were able to get into this position to fly when, although they had all the credentials, there was nothing to indicate that they had the skills necessary to even be in that position or even have that job. A lot of red flags with that. And Able Danger is just one of many operations that was going on at that time to essentially address counterterrorism actions and so forth. And they were clearly aware. Now, when those inside Able Danger reported this, they were told to shut down the investigation. There was one individual who was part of that who essentially resigned and went to work for security at the World Trade Center. And, well, the thing is, at that point, Marvin Bush, a nephew of George Bush Jr., began to work as the head of security in the World Trade Center. And there were several weeks during the summer, prior to September 11th, where several floors of the buildings were closed, and although people were working in the building, elevators couldn't access certain floors. There was a constant amount of dust coming in through the air ducts and so forth. Very powderized concrete, and there was a lot of noises going on in these floors that supposedly had nobody in there, but there was obviously something going on. Now, speaking of the World Trade Center, they were completed in 1973. Now, this was obviously a very big thing back in its time. And, hold on. And it used a new type of technique with its core and its core structure that was essentially made to hold up the building in a very effective load-bearing manner. And the architects actually designed the complex to be able to take a full, straight-on hit from a fully loaded 737 and not have a problem. So this is obviously something that they were well aware of, and they planned accordingly to ensure that the building could handle a direct hit from the biggest plane of that time, or one of the biggest planes. The biggest at that point was 747. But regardless, coincidentally as well, as it opened in 1973, but Project Plowshare, a United States program that was made to use nuclear explosives for peaceful construction, ended in 1973. It started in 1957. Now, if you really look into the building of the WTC and the knowledge that they would eventually need to be taken down, and in such a large, highly populated city like New York, it would be almost impossible to deconstruct it like a normal building. However, it was essentially planned that these buildings could be set up so that a nuclear device could be used to essentially collapse the building upon itself onto its footprint and mitigate any potential damage outside of that area. So that's something to keep in mind. Why? Well, after the collapses, the areas of the basements of WTC 1 and 2 were radioactive. There was ample evidence of Geiger counters just going off the charts when they would expose to these highly radiated areas, as well as the fact that there was molten metal down there for close to 8 months. And they couldn't essentially do anything. They could try to cool it down as much as they could, but that would cause more particulates and so forth. And, well, that is something that was, if you look deep into it, was something that was considered as one of the methods to bring down this building if it ever needed to be removed. Now, let's see. Drew makes a good point. Hold on, before we do that, Derek Hans says, I meet various engineers throughout my career. Recently, I was fortunate enough to meet one of the leading fire-stopping materials engineers at a job in a prison near me. What he told me completely blew my mind, and will always be convinced it was a planned attack. Yes, we'll get to that in a moment. Drew says those buildings were losing money hand over fist. There's no chance of the public approving the demolition of those buildings. That as well comes into play. And yes, they were losing a lot of money. And in fact, they had gotten to the point where, and I'm going to just show you this image right now, they got to the point where they actually started to remove previous floors in the building. And it was actually constructed in this way to allow for this. So let me just pull up this image. For some reason I didn't have it loaded. There we go. I thought I did. But if you take a look at this image right here, you can actually clearly see that there is a column, the central column in the tower, and you have massive amounts of open area. Now, simple logic tells you that you would not be able to see the sun coming so clearly, as well as the rest of the sky coming in so clearly from the opposite side, if there was floors in between. It would be impossible. Plus, on the right, you see the other tower. This is just before completion. You can see there's still a crane at the top of the right tower. And you can clearly see the column, the central column, and you can see open area spaces around them. So it's pretty clear that this building essentially was constructed in such a way that floors could be removed, and that although it would look quite hefty, that it would be mostly empty. Now, point made by Bam is, he says, the guy who just bought the towers, Larry he's a Stein of some sort. Hold on. Let me just get this. What's his name? They called him Lucky Larry, but the fact is his name is Larry Silverstein. Well, one of the Steens. And yeah, he basically purchased the buildings and insured them, and specifically insured them for terrorism, strangely enough. Then when the event actually occurred, and they only wanted to give him one payout because they considered it one attack, he said no. It was multiple attacks, and I lost 2 buildings. So he essentially, I believe it was, he made 3 times the profit from the insurance policy, and came out looking came out with a lot of money, and he even was on camera admitting that he gave the order to pull World Trade Center 7 down. Now, the only time you use the word pull is when, in fact, you're actually doing a controlled demolition. And some people say, oh, there wasn't controlled demolitions, you're crazy. No, these people are impacted so much by the cognitive dissonance that they face when exposed to the fact that their reality is a lie, and that they were lied to for the last 20 years, and that they've always believed in government for some fucked up reason. Hey, Baldilocks. Hey, Baldilocks. That's shot number 2 there, Travis, if you're keeping track. Yeah, you can't deny this sort of thing. You can't. You can delude yourself as much as you want, but just like Derek, we can talk to experts ourselves. Nothing's stopping us from doing that. And, well, we can get their opinion as well. What, you think I'm going to take the official word of someone who's paid off by the government who also benefits from, tyrannical, more tyrannical laws and that sort of thing? So, that's appeal to authority, which is what many weak individuals do. But this is undeniable, absolutely undeniable. And what about the fact that without even conducting a proper investigation, a lot of this steel was sent over to China? Now, that's not what you do with a crime scene. You analyze this information. But let me go back to the chat. Derailed says, curious, doesn't the photo show how hollow the building actually was? Thus, the likelihood could have come down without much effort? No, wrong. This thing was made to take a hit directly from a jetliner. And when buildings collapse on their own, they don't have that type of angle cut. Okay, that's clearly cut. And how does it get cut? Well, with the use of things like thermite. And you can see much evidence of that on that day. Liquid metal oozing out of the building. And it's quite clear, for those that spent the time to study this, is that is the only way to start to loosen the central core trusses, or the central core. And the trusses, as the NTSC wants to say, did not weaken because of jet fuel. Let me quickly show you this image here. Where is it? Hold on. There we go. Okay, so just a nice little infographic there showing you how much jet fuel was available compared to the size of the buildings. Derek Hand says, I can confirm that the leading engineer that was in charge for all the projects that took place at those towers was instructed a week before the attack to clear his desk out and to be out by 9:10. And Bam says, Building 7 fell down at free fall speed. Well, all of them did. All of them did. The first tower, a portion of it initially started to tilt, but it rectified itself, and there was massive amounts of explosions recorded. And I believe in New Jersey, there is, as well as as far as Maine, I believe, there are several earthquake sensor stations, and they picked up explosions prior to the collapses of these buildings. And the video footage actually also shows that prior to the collapse, you hear a succession of explosions, and then the tower starts to come down with additional explosions being heard. And along the way, many people saw this. Squibs ejecting from the building. And not just squibs, but full large steel columns being thrown out hundreds of meters, or hundreds of yards if you'd like to use an American term. And a collapse does not do that. An explosion does. So, it's quite clear that something is amiss. And as was being said, this is a photo just after the collapse. And you can see the WTC is still standing quite well. In fact, it was standing all day until about 4 p.m. And there's video footage of the cops telling people and the firefighters, move back, the building's coming down. And then there was actually alerts on megaphones, very similar to those used by people in demolitions, warning and counting down. This is on record. This is on record. It wasn't hit by a plane. And the debris that did touch it had nowhere close to being able to bring it down. However, people seem to forget who was housed there. The CIA, the NSA, the DIA, the FBI, and a few other groups. And, strange fires just randomly started inside the building. And this is while the fires of the two main buildings, WTC 1 and 2, were still burning. So still no impact, still no collapse onto this building, still standing. Yet strangely enough, throughout the day, fires in there, and, well, a lot of authorities saying, yep, that building's going to come down, we're going to pull it. So obviously, it dispels the lies, as well as that video footage of a BBC broadcaster saying that the Harriman Brothers building, which is what they called WTC 7, had collapsed. While she's doing this broadcast, the building is still standing behind her. Now, a comment that was just mentioned, which I'm actually going to address just now once I pull up the image, is this. So by only sheer coincidence, the alleged terrorist managed to strike the budget analyst office at the Pentagon on 9/11. And it was here where the Department of Defense staff were working on the mystery of the missing $2.3 trillion disclosed by Secretary Rumsfeld the day before. Conveniently, the topic of the missing money disappeared along with any reliable trace of the plane that was alleged to have been used in the attack. That's right. That's right. Because it's quite clear that there was a lot more going on than the authorities would like to admit. So let me just bring up this other graphic here. And where else? Hold on. Oh, speaking of the Pentagon, let's show this. And I've got some videos to show you people. I've got some very, very interesting videos to show you people. So, obviously, anybody that has any knowledge of plane structures, the materials that they're built with, knows that there's no chance in hell, that a plane of that size could have conducted what definitely appeared to be a maneuver made by a missile, because the G's themselves, the effect of gravity, would have essentially been so much to either rip the wings off that plane or potentially, and additionally I should say, render the pilots unconscious. So this, and let's remember the area that this plane struck was actually recently updated and was reinforced. So we have now apparently a jetliner that can break through 3 different rings, leave no debris, by the way. Apparently it just got absorbed by that hole. And, well, it was hardened enough, you know, because if you ever seen a plane that's been hit by a bird in the nose, it just smashes that nose cone. Just totally destroys it. So you're telling me that it was hardened enough to function like a missile and to blow right through that entire area. Also, there were bombs planted at the Pentagon. There's footage of certain areas that apparently were hit by a plane with all this fuel, and there's a clear photo of a book that's sitting on a stool that's open and not singed whatsoever. So, very, very interesting, isn't it? Let me just continue with my graphics here. There's a lot of images. Bear with me. Nice, a lot of images. Let's go here for a moment, and I'll just catch up with the chat. Shout out to the 21 viewers. Let's see. Leaping Lizard says, we are supposed to come closer together as a country after 9/11, but the country has just been getting worse and worse every year since then. Derek Han says, you're absolutely right, Dave. The fire-stopping material used on those towers is resistant to that. It's made by Hiddle, top of the line. Yep. I've already addressed Bam's comment on the missing money. Derek Han says, I was always 90% convinced it was an inside job, but after meeting the engineer, I'm 110% convinced. Bam says, just by coincidence, the Pentagon gets hit exactly where the accounting area of the Pentagon. Yep. Costanza says, now millennials automatically think Republicans are all Bush Juniors. Yep. Bam makes another great point. Obama is a Bush family member. He's actually related. They're 12th cousins, I believe. Also, Justin Trudeau is 11th cousin of Hillary Clinton. But speaking of Bush, essentially for the 2 to 3 days after the event of September 11th, as you might remember, all air flights were grounded, except those belonging to family members of the Bin Laden family. The Bin Ladens and the Bushes have been friends since the 70s. And they've worked tightly together. They vacationed together. And they've got like nicknames for each other. So while all people were grounded and not able to fly, there was thousands actually of Americans stuck in Gander, Nova Scotia. These people were quietly and secretly moved out of the country. But why? Well, I'm sure all those still censored documents of the 9/11 attack have that information. In fact, it's been spoken a lot about, where the references to Saudi Arabia have been removed. Remember, none of those hijackers were Iraqi or Afghani. They were Saudi Arabian. So let's go back to the chat here. Travis says the Pentagon is a massive red flag. Well, that's one of many. And yeah, he says anyone who believes that was a plane is insane. Yep. I can't remember the exact term, but it's the groundswell, I believe. It's when the plane flies too low to the ground, that the difference in pressure causes the plane to be, first of all, to become unstable. Flight becomes unstable. And anything underneath that, like grass, gets ripped up and torn to shreds. So we definitely did not see that with the Pentagon. What we saw is a pristine front lawn and only a very small number of weird debris, which should have been left there, but then all the staff was asked to come out to the lawn and start to comb up that material and collect it. That's not how it happens in a crime scene, especially at this point. Nobody should have known who it was, but unfortunately, because they had been drumming this up for years, you have, for example, 1998, the United States Embassy twin bombings that happened both in Nairobi and in Tanzania, both supposedly blamed on Osama bin Laden. So by this point, they're already building up the narrative that they need. And then in 2000, you have the USS Cole bombing. And, well, we have evidence that in the year 2000, Osama bin Laden had been basically admitted to a Dubai hospital for kidney dialysis. Now, let me continue here. Back to the chat. Um, Costanza says asbestos is also a main item in to the buildings in the 70s. Yes, which was another reason why it would just cost too much money to bring these buildings down normally, because you'd have to take care of the environmental controls. It would bankrupt them. It would bankrupt them to have to bring these buildings down. But with a terrorist attack and all those asbestos, they they wouldn't need to do that, or won't have to be responsible for literally the thousands of cancer cases that came about after that. Remember all the dogs that were searching the debris for bodies? They're all dead. They all died from cancers. Back to the chat. Bam says the Pentagon, which was the most surveilled building in the world, yet not one video. Well, I've got one. But yes, that is a good point. It is literally one of the most surveilled buildings in the world. And on top of that, let's not forget, it's also one of the most defended buildings in the world. Just because you look up on the internet or you look at a postcard that doesn't show any defenses around the Pentagon doesn't mean that they're not surrounded by hundreds of anti-ballistic missile or anti-air missile batteries. So just because you don't see them doesn't mean they're not there and can instantly, well, they're supposed to be on all the time. So anything coming into radar vicinity, especially for controlled airspace, like the Pentagon, would have immediately been targeted, and it would have been fired upon without any fucking hesitation. Derailed brings up a good point. Didn't they confiscate videos from business near the Pentagon? Yes, all of them. There was a gas station that literally had a camera pointed right to the point of impact. Soon after the hit, probably the Secret Service showed up there and took it by force. And he never got a copy of it. That's one of many. So there's obviously a lot when it comes to the Pentagon that raises red flags, and it all comes together. If you've got common sense and you realize that you've got knowledge of this issue coming, well, of course you're going to try to take advantage of it as much as possible. By the way, after the collapse of the WTC complex, numerous number of dump trucks and stuff were found in the tunnels underneath the WTC, loaded up with gold, because there was a secure location in there in the basement that was used to hold gold that belonged to other countries. And there was dozens of trucks loaded with all this gold. And that just disappeared, and disappeared obviously from the public's memory. But back to the chat here. Costanza says, there are random videos of the NYC the day and month before 9/11, amateur tourism footage. Costanza says those videos are on YouTube. Okay. Let me go back to this. You know what? Let's do this first. Let's show more vids, or let's show vids, and then I'll get back to some of these screenshots here. So I can make this one bigger. I've tried, OBS being dumb, I've tried to adjust this, and I adjust some of these videos, and some of the other ones get too large and stuff. So I'm going to show this as I have it right now. If anyone wants any particular video played back and made larger, let me know. But let's go. There we go. There's the collapse. Look, there are the squibs. There's the squibs. More squibs. Squibs. More squibs. More squibs. Where's the plane? Where's the plane?
Oh my god. Right
Oh, that's not possible. No, it's not. No, it's not. Not possible there, Frankie. Not possible. Look at that. No plane. And there, on the right, a nice CGI plane inserted. Remember, this wasn't live, people. There was at least 10 seconds of delay. Now, this is the infamous gray ball approach. This video keeps getting scrubbed from the internet. I had to really dig deep to be able to find a copy of it. And this is something that people noticed that day. That for some reason, there's no plane there, but it's this weird ball. A weird orb. A sphere of some sort. And there you go. You'll probably see it come in. Yeah. That doesn't look like a plane to me. That don't look like a plane to me. I'll tell you what I think in a moment, but that certainly ain't no plane. Now, something else I want to point out is that at this angle, you can see You can see the Hudson, you can see the bay, you can see areas beyond it. There's other videos of this same angle, and there's nothing beyond it. But at this angle, you have to be able to see the ground. You have to be able to see the buildings surrounding it. But in some videos, it's like white. It's like there's no city. That last video was supposedly from the Pentagon. So let me go back. Oh, there we go. Oops. Nope. That was supposedly taken by was said to be one of the helicopters that was flying around the Pentagon that day. So I'm gonna, let's see here, go back here. Okay, and just bear with me here. And we'll go back to this for now. So yeah, those videos obviously show things that most mainstream does not. Back to the chat. Let's see here. Shout out to Derek Hans, who says, I really hope you get the time to do more vids like this, Dave. Absolutely nobody does it better. I miss the days of After Midnight with you and Lucky Low. Yep. Those were good times. And again, I still don't have Darkest Realms fully the way I want it to, and being a perfectionist piece of shit as I am, I decided to use Darker Things as another one shot to discuss this video or this topic. We got Sith Negan, top donator to me. Thank you very much. He says, once again, Detective Rose, always on the case, getting the truth of the matter. Well done, sir. Thank you very much. We got Danimal in the chat. Shout out to Danimal. Hope he's also enjoying this beautiful Ontario summer-esque weather. So apparently Sith Negan is confirming that Google is shadow banning this video. I don't doubt it. Derek Hans says, if the recent events of how the government and big tech can censor information we seek online, then nothing will. Exactly. Jada says, what if this happened in the age of the cell phones we have now? They'd probably have to choose a different narrative for one. But yeah, there would have been... You know what they probably may have done is and you see this actually a lot when shit happens around today. When a certain event happens that, should never have occurred, if you know what I'm saying, you'll have Twitter outages. You'll have YouTube outages. You'll have social media, Facebook outages. That always coincides when something's up, something's rumbling. And whether it be somebody's taking military action or perhaps there's some sort of operation going on, they'll create these distractions or these disruptions as distractions so that eyes are not on what they're doing. This happens all the time, and it's been happening a lot more, obviously, since 9/11, since social media and the advent of the smartphone became basically widely adopted. Of course, Google doesn't like the truth. Google is actually owned by a company called Alphabet. Now, anybody in the know knows that any three-letter agency is referred to as an alphabet agency. In fact, well, the NSA works hand in hand with Google, and the NSA has been known to create these sort of technologies and then put them under well, it's not just the NSA, but put them under the guise of a private entity. So now you're at arm's length, and there's plausible deniability, but now you're utilizing the technology that the Americans, created or exploited, and then they're making profit from it, now being able to filter it off into other, sometimes front organizations. That's why HARP, for example, and its patents were sold to a private company. By the way, that's your taxpayer money that was basically just thrown away. So now there's technology which essentially can modify the weather, which they have admitted, as well as do what it was initially intended to, which is to disrupt satellite operations by heating the ionosphere. And plus over-the-horizon radar. No, now it's in control of private hands, and that's a lot easier to start creating a false paper trail, because the military and the government always has a paper trail. So if you want to make it a black project, but with not much government oversight, then you sell this off to a private organization, just like Facebook. Facebook used to be called, Facebook when developed by the military was called LifeLog, I believe. And then they got somebody whose family's been part of the military-industrial complex, and they choose them as their figurehead, just like Bezos. Do you wonder how these people just come out of the woodwork and become billionaires? And yet, well, when we look at it, they're hand in hand in the government. It's because they were chosen for that role. They're puppets, yes. They have some control, but they're just the face of the cover. So LifeLog, that's, I believe, what it was. LifeLog, created by the NSA, CIA, and other tech groups. And then, now we got a movie about Facebook making it look like it was Zuckerberg that stole the idea from a pair of friends, and now, no. Back to the chat. JD says, literally as Dave said, that cell phone signal went out. A lot of chat going on here. Oh, on his cell phone. Bam says if he looks this stuff up, he will use DuckDuckGo. Yeah, it's a somewhat better alternative. He says he uses the Danimal says he uses the DuckDuckGo Go browser. There's quite a few browsers out there that do that. Brave does it. There's a version of Chrome. I think it's called Unchromed, and all they did was they ripped out all the major Google stuff, and they just crippled their ability to do anything. So let's see here. Tiff in the chat says, people still haven't realized that the United States is not actually a country, but is a business. Well, the corporation of the United States of America, yes, is a business. And it doesn't seem to be a republic anymore. But yeah, there's a lot that goes into that. Let's see here. Back to the images. So let's discuss a bit about what really happened. So let me just bring up this image. Well, first of all, this image here is a painting that was found in Epstein's, I believe, New York office. Epstein also has a painting made of Bill Clinton wearing that blue dress that Lewinsky submitted to the cops and had his semen on there. So that's how they were able to identify that he was involved in an affair. But yeah, this painting was found in Epstein's office. And obviously he's quite good friends with Bush. I don't say was because I don't necessarily think he killed himself. And, well, actually, I don't even think he's dead, to be quite honest. But obviously he didn't kill himself. But yes, let's just not ignore these sorts of things. The elite love to laugh at us, and they like to wink at each other. Go fuck yourself, Inspector Todd. But yes, so this is just one example that there was an understanding, let's say. Now, let me show you some more images, because this is where we're going to go down the rabbit hole even further. Let's talk about this. The SES is an organization in the United States. It's referred to as the Senior Executive Service. I'll just break it down for you. This is the shadow government, the cabal, the deep state, and this is essentially what Don Cheney. Is it Don? What was his name? The vice president. Don Cheney. Dick Cheney. He is a dick. Yeah, Dick Cheney basically is the head of, or was the head of the SES during this time. And he basically, that's where he would disappear to. Everyone was asking, where's Dick Cheney? Where's Dick Cheney? During the first couple of weeks after 9/11. He was basically underground. I'm not sure if he was at Camp David. There's so many. Crystal Lake, Crystal Peak, I believe. There's a lot of different underground facilities that are made for what's called continuity of government. So in a situation like this, attack on the country, you've got to get, powerful leaders protected and make sure that the government can continue even if there was a nuclear war or something like that. So that's where Cheney was. He was underground running the SES. Let's see. Tiff says there's a rumor that you can technically cash in your birth certificate as it's supposedly a bond. I believe it's more of a contract of indebtitude or of debt. Indenture, actually, is the proper word. And there is apparently something called the person's stock market. I think that's one of the names. I can't remember, but apparently, yeah, if you look into this, there does seem to be a stock market for the value of people based on their birth certificates. Also, it seems to be that the reason why everyone's name on government documents are spelt in capital letters is that's what's required by law to identify a product and not a person. It gets kind of crazy. So let's see here. Back to the images. Almost. So I'm going to show that one in a moment. Got to build up to it though. Okay, let's talk about this. This tweet was made in 2017. So the Prime Minister of Israel says, we also understand the pain of our American brothers and sisters who are marking today an event of enormous magnitude, the September 11th bombings. Very interesting. And you might ask, well, what's this Israeli connection? Well, one of them was the famous Dancing Israelis, who apparently were working for an organization called Universal or United Moving Services, but they were filmed actually on that white van that you see at the top of the image there, filming the towers prior to the impacts. And once the impacts occurred, they were seen dancing, cheering, and celebrating. Multiple witnesses of this. And once the police were called, obviously, and they arrested them, and they found that, well, apparently a bomb squad had to be called because the dogs could smell the scent of explosives, but they didn't find any there. However, They had Israeli passports. They had other questionable documentation. They had no real answer to why they were there to film that. And eventually, they were quickly deported because the FBI stepped in. And because they were arrested at that point, then they were released and quickly whisked out of the country. I believe a few months later, they appeared on TV, on Israeli TV. And if you take a look at the two images just above the bottom one, so you can see that Omer Marmari and Oded Elmer, looks like, they're on the same stage. They're on the same talk show stage. And on that show, they actually admitted that they were there to document the event. So it's well known that the Israelis, specifically Mossad, was aware of what was going on. They were tracking some of these terrorists who were living in Brooklyn. They weren't informing their American counterparts, but American and other foreign services documented them. And when they approached the American team, like organizations and leaders, to say, we got these guys here in Brooklyn doing weird shit, and they're really not supposed to be doing this. Like, you know, what do we do? They're like, shut it down. Your investigation's over. Forget you knew that. So there's clearly something much more than those want to admit. Let me just look at this document here. Hold on. This one's a little small. I want to see, what is this? Oh yeah, more information on this is a FBI report on these Israelis. Okay. And I'm going to bring up another image here in a moment. So bear with me. And there is a lot, actually, before I continue with that, let me just go back to listen to what, or read what this guy says. Inspector Todd says, this is what we needed. Sorry, Drew, but you had a lineup of all debunkers on your show that ignored every hole in the official story. Yes, I would have to somewhat agree with that. And, yeah, Honey Hanjour was just one of the many supposed hijackers who couldn't fly. But there's been long talk about this, but there's evidence of it. There's absolute evidence of this. People were warned that day, specifically people who had Israeli heritage, connections, worked with Israeli companies, or just were Jewish. And there's overwhelming evidence of this, people, is that these individuals were specifically warned that day either to not show up to work or to get out of the buildings before the events started happening. There's a long, ample amount of evidence that proves this. And this is an actual article that Haaretz from Israel produced and published on September 11th, 2017. Again, the same date that you had the Israeli PM refer to the event as bombings. Now, something that needs to be understood is that Israel, when it comes to technology and intelligence collection, they're basically superior to China. They have services that are used all over the world, and it's been proven already that illegally they are sort of stealing this stuff and collecting this information. Then they make big profits by selling it to China. But they're involved with a lot of high-level, high-security intelligence gathering systems. And it basically allows for them to have, full knowledge of worldwide events using a very quick computerized service. And as you can see with this article here, it's also referring to ICQ. You might have remembered that program back from the, I believe it was late 90s, early 2000s, and Yeah, that's also a well-known Israeli instant messaging service. So, that's another thing. Inspector Todd says Willie Brown was warned was warned, and he was the San Francisco mayor at the time. Yes, several people were told essentially to not fly in, starting in June. What was his name? I can't remember, but there's literally a dozen, at least a dozen different government officials that were told, do not fly. Stop flying commercial, take cars, avoid these areas. They were told. And there's ample evidence because they came out of, basically right after this happened and said, yeah, I was told to stop flying in June. Let's see here. Let me move on to the next one. Okay, so we've got this here. Again, going on still with the connection with Israel. Well, specifically the Mossad. There was this going on. So there was this supposed art performance put on by these Israeli students in the days prior to September 11th. And, as is being analyzed here, the boxes that are sort of blocking this area, they all refer to a particular fuse holder, which is for controlled demolition. Now, in the areas where this team, by the way, these students were called, or they called themselves, E-Team. Now, this is part of their display on the left, as I'm going to show. This is their art performance, or part of it. And strangely enough, it seems to coincide quite well with the impact zones. Remember, if a plane had actually hit that, it would have been sliced like cheese, and hundreds of pounds of debris would have just rained down upon people. It wouldn't go like a pencil and just disappear, be enveloped by a building, especially with the outer columns. They were quite strong, and they would essentially stay in place while this, the softer aluminum of the plane would just squeeze through it. Anything left on the outside would just fall out. So, no, what we saw did not happen. And this is clear evidence that there is a correlation to these locations. So let me just find that other image here. Sorry, I've got too many images. Oh, okay, so I did show that. Okay. Regardless, let's go back to here. And let's now get into some of the details here. So, Inspector Todd makes another great point, is that that there was a lot of put options put out there, yes. And put options are basically, it's speculation, so that you're speculating that a stock is going to drop in price. So there's massive put options put on American Airlines and the other, I can't remember the other airline that was used. And they were all traced back to the CIA. There's Buzzy, I believe it was Buzzy Conrad. Let me see, it's been a while since I looked him up, but he's well connected to, hold on, CIA put options, 9/11, Buzzy, come on. Oh, it was close. Krongard. I said Conrad. Krongard. He was a CIA director at that point. And yeah, he handled the put options. They made millions. What else? Sith Negan says, I heard a lot of WTC employees didn't go to work that day. That's true. Now, let's see. Oh, there's something else that was forgotten is that there were a lot of bombs that were going off on 9/11 around the buildings that day. And in fact, I remember hearing this the day is that there was a truck, for example, that was stopped that was full of explosives, and it was in the George Washington Bridge, around the George Washington Bridge. There was tunnels as well that they found trucks with explosive in. It seems like there was more planned, but it either didn't go off or they chose not to do it. Let's see what else here. Okay, let's talk a bit about the hijackers. So, yeah, they were, as I talked about, they were trained in the U.S., and some of them actually were trained by the U.S. military. Let's see here. Yeah, at the Naval Air Station at Pensacola. Ample amount of evidence there. I also mentioned that several suspects were identified by Able Danger Project in 2000. Yeah, these Israeli art students apparently spied on the hijackers before the event. Let's not forget Mohammed Atta received $100,000 wired by the chief of Pakistan's intelligence security service, but they're called ISI. And Mohammed Atta also met in Germany with some people who still haven't been identified, and clearly there was some planning done there. Also, these hijackers who were supposedly devout Muslims were documented using drugs, drinking alcohol, and going to strip clubs. Apparently, the day or 2 days before, they were in a strip club in Florida. None of them were featured on the passenger manifests for the planes. And we also know that some of their belongings, including things like passports, were found unsinged, despite the fact that apparently all that jet fuel took down those buildings. But yeah, unsinged. I'm sure that it's quite believable. I already talked about Inspector Todd. Derek Hand says, oh yeah, you already said that. We've got the fact that the hijackers were immediately identified, but they weren't on the manifests. This is impossible, okay? Unless they were running an operation for the government, and they thought that it was some sort of plan to assist the government. Remember, there's ample information and evidence that, if they need a boogeyman, the government will create one. And that actually is similar to what happened at the WTC 1993 bombings, is that this supposed FBI this FBI informant was instructed by the FBI to participate in this thing to try to catch terrorists. But then they gave him actual live ammunition, and live explosives, and he was already concerned with this. And then they told him to place it at a very strong, or very important structural column in the basement. And he also thought, why am I being told to do this? So he actually recorded his FBI handler, essentially trying to get him to do these sorts of things. And he purposely parked his van away from that column, so when that explosion did occur, it actually did not affect the structural integrity of that building. And he later came out and proved that he was set up, actually. There's ample evidence that several of the hijackers came out after the event, said, that wasn't me. Like, I'm alive. I'm here. Some people, some of their parents actually were contacted by them, I guess somewhat concerned that, what had just been showed on TV was totally false and that they weren't involved with that, but they were scared for their lives. This only makes sense if they were working with the government and then they were used as patsies at the last moment. So, remember, they were doing exercises in June about planes being hijacked, specifically with these intents. And that's just one aspect there. Let me just go to here. I'm going to keep checking with the chat. By the way, if anyone wants to call in and share their opinion, share their thoughts, feel free. And all right, so there was massive foreknowledge. Many people spoke to the FBI and told them they knew about things. They were told to shut up. We have the Project for a New American Century, which basically said that absent of a catastrophic event like 9/11, they would not be able to implement their view of neocon globalists to the rest of the world, which means, again, trying to take control of resources like oil, rare earth minerals, strategic points to provide a hegemony. And it was announced that they had these war plans already set up, and they obviously had their patsy already prepared because they had been preparing the public for years that it was going to be Osama bin Laden. This is his name, John Ashcroft. He stopped flying commercial flights in July 2001. It was in the August 6th presidential daily brief that Condoleezza Rice was warned about potential attacks utilizing planes. Top Pentagon officials canceled their travel plans on September 10th. Goldman Sachs in Japan warned their staff on September 10th. And Bush stayed at Booker's school on 9/11. Now, you might remember he was supposedly reading a story about a goat, I think. And, well, initially, somebody comes in and whispers something to his ear, and he looks somewhat disturbed, but then he continues on in the class. That is a total violation of protocol, especially for the Secret Service. As soon as there even is a suspicion of something occurring, again, you don't have to, the president doesn't have to panic the kids. He's like, oh, I got to go do president stuff. Oh, I got to go pee. Sorry. They had to whisk him out there. What did they do? They didn't. Well, that's because Cheney was running the SES, so he was where he needed to be, the actual brains behind it. I remember when the Republicans were trying to find someone to be their front runner for the 2000 election, and they couldn't find anybody. Cheney was already set up to be, just like George Bush Sr. was, the vice president, because that's where the power, comes from, or some of it. But, you're behind the scenes and you're not the fucking puppet. You pick the good talking, good looking fucking puppet, and, they'll attract all the negativity in case you fuck up. So they couldn't find anybody. And eventually they picked, and I remember reading about this too, they picked George Bush, and they weren't very pleased at all because they all knew he's a fucking moron. And he, but they needed somebody. So they picked him specifically because he had a way to play up being dumb, because he's not that stupid, actually. But he can play it up very well. So they picked him, and he won, supposedly. But there's also the fact that when he was asked later on, I believe that day, about what happened when he heard about the the tower getting hit, he actually said, and this is on record, he actually said that he saw this live on TV. Well, that's impossible because there was nothing live filming on TV at that point, on any major network, that is. But if perhaps you have live feed because the Secret Service or some other deep state agency is providing you with that, well then yeah, you probably could have seen that live. So the only supposed video of the first impact was made by those two French brothers who were coincidentally in New York filming the firefighters that day. And they conveniently got something on camera. Well, they've got connections to the deep state, and there's a lot of mounting evidence that there's manipulation in that video, and that they were utilized to help spread this narrative. Let's see here. Derek Hand says, he also told me, referring to this engineer guy, there's a third plane that day that flew over after the second tower hit. Yes, there was a lot of planes that were seen that day. In fact, it was over Washington, D.C. where the Doomsday plane was seen flying around. And this was documented. People were like, what kind of plane is that? It's basically... it's a hardened... Let me just actually get you the direct definition because, I mean, I could tell you what it does, but I'd rather give you the exact details because it's a particular type of plane. It's prepared for nuclear and electronic warfare. And so airborne command post. So it's essentially, continuity of government. Operating under the National Airborne Operations Center, and it's basically a Boeing E-4B. And yeah, they're supposed to be able to fly for weeks on end, and yeah, they'll have to get refueled and all, but they're hardened towards radiation, towards nuclear explosions, and they're basically supposed to run in case there's a nuclear war and the government needs to have people alive and constantly on the move. That's their purpose. But there was a plane. Apparently, this is also what was noticed at the Pentagon. Is that this is what some witnesses say, is that a plane flew over the Pentagon and essentially released a missile. So it sort of covered the missile as it flew over it, but it released it obviously from one of its pylons, and then whoop. But it just continued to fly over the Pentagon. New York also had a bunch of helicopters flying around. And in fact, there was several times where news helicopters tried to get to the roof of the WTC to try to rescue people, and they were ordered away. They were told to move away. By the way, FEMA was running an operation those days. Actually, the day before, and I think the day prior to that. But they were in New York. They were there ready in full force. And coincidentally, they were ready to handle something that they had been planning for. Wow. Who'd have thunk it? It's just so many coincidences. So, someone's asking me about donations. So I'll just put those up right now. You can donate if you like to PayPal, to me on PayPal with that email address. So, yeah, let's get back to this foreknowledge here. Apparently, see, this I did not know. Hold on a second. Let me just confirm that this is, in fact... Okay, so yeah. Apparently, Jeb Bush declared martial law on September 7th, 2001, under Florida Executive Order number 01-261. And this was 4 days before the WTC attack. And yeah, this is quite interesting, actually. I was not aware of this. It's not out of the ordinary in the sense that, you know, you can expect anything with these motherfuckers. But yeah, I would suggest you look into that. It looks like something that could yield some great results. But oh yeah, Ariel Sharon, who was the Israeli Prime Minister, apparently canceled his trip to New York for those days. And I believe it was George Bush Sr. was meeting with a Saudi yeah, he was the Saudi ambassador. They met down the street from the WTC for breakfast. Oh, Larry Silverstein, he and his wife canceled appointments that day, strangely. And, you know, they would have been at that site having breakfast that morning if they hadn't just changed their normal plans they'd been doing for years prior. You know how old people get. They always want their, you know, repetition, schedule, whatever. And, yeah, that's obviously foreknowledge. Let me just go back to the chat here. So yeah, if anyone wants to call in, I encourage you to do so. Always nice to discuss with others. There was obviously the stand downs that were given. There was actually operations that were going on that day that were, I know that because in Canada they were actually doing training exercises about Russian bombers coming in, and then they got a supposed report of a Russian bomber coming in, so they went there. Again, operations covering, you know, exercises, but then it turned out to be false. But oh, coincidentally, now they'd been moved far enough away that the East Coast only literally had 6 fighter jets to supposedly defend it. That's also very questionable. This is literally the, you know, powerhouse of the world, okay? And with all the trillions that have been invested into the military-industrial complex, you're going to tell me that they had no way to defend themselves. It's bullshit. And again, if it really was that level of government incompetence, why was nobody ever fired? Why did nobody ever get charged with negligence or dereliction of duty? Very interesting. Some people might remember the testimony given by those that were in the White House during the beginning, and as a plane was approaching the Pentagon, Cheney was asked, does the stand down order still stand? And he said, I didn't say anything to the contrary, very angrily. So he had made a call down order, or a stand down order, to all the forces that were supposed to defend the Pentagon, and let it happen. There's a lot of evidence that these exercises that were going on that day were actually inserting false blips into FAA radar, and it was confusing traffic controllers. They were also making some of their supposed planes, you know, the planes that were involved, supposedly, disappear from radar. There was, let's see here, I don't want to bore you guys too much because there's so much we could talk about. And plus, it would be nice if somebody would call in to help me out here by just taking the strain off me having to talk all the time. I have a show tonight to do, people. And plus, you guys wanted this, so I thought I'd offer it. And I wasn't going to do it tomorrow. That's, to me, it's in bad taste. Although the truth needs to be told, it's just, I don't know. You know what? It's not really in bad taste. It's just that it would be trying for some, because I remember perfectly well where I was, and it's like it was yesterday to me. Like, it's obviously it's traumatized me. After that day, is surreal almost. But I remember every detail, and I remember where I was and how all this more information kept coming, and I mean I was stuck to the TV for 3 to 4 days. Like it happened on a Tuesday, so I mean every day from Tuesday until Friday, or even Saturday, I was just glued to the TV, and yeah, for probably a few months afterwards, still in shock, I would say, because it was that earth shattering, obviously, and having witnessed all that and been inundated by those horrific images, especially watching people jump off the tower and stuff. Yeah, that has an effect. So, but I wanted to cover this as well because it is 20 years, and it's 20 years of lies. 20 years that people have either swallowed the lies because it shook their worlds too much for them to confront things, or they're basically fully aware of it and I guess totally in support of it. But it's something that never needed to happen, in my opinion. Well, obviously, because I'm human, but these fucking demonic scum, these elite, they wanted it to introduce their new world order, obviously. Look what happened with the Department of Homeland Security. That organization should never even needed to have existed, because look at all the other alphabet agencies in America that should have been able to handle this, and they failed. So rather than fire those responsible and basically get competent people, they just create a new department and thousands of other bureaucrats now, and even more fucking infringements on personal rights. Let's see here. Apparently Inspector Todd's going to download this as soon as it's done. Hopefully it works. So apparently I am being shadow banned. Well, it's better than the video getting taken down. But, a great point that Tiff is making. Seth MacFarlane stepped on that plane, then there would be no more... Oh, if Seth MacFarlane had stepped on that plane, there'd be no more Family Guy, since Family Guy debuted in 1999. Same for Mark Wahlberg. Michael Jackson had a meeting at WTC that very morning. I heard those stories as well. Let's see here. By the way, the guy who had that interaction with Cheney, his name was Norman Mineta. And he's on several videos out there that he's interviewed on to talk about exactly what he experienced. Let's see here. Also, by the way, there's no way in hell that a cell phone in that time could have, even today, it's very difficult to accomplish this. But you cannot make a call from a cellular phone at 10,000 feet and have it come out clear as it did when those supposed recordings took place. Nowadays, we have technology where you can connect up to the plane's transmission system, and that is what helps beam your call. But especially in 2001, phones were not capable of that. So all these calls that we supposedly heard did not take place in the air. We're going to get to my suspicions in a moment. Let me quickly check with the chat here. Yes, Tiff is making a good point. I heard the people on the plane called their loved ones, but their voices sounded like robots. Yes. there's a lot more to that. There's a lot more to that. Now, remember, the NSA had a gigahertz CPU working for them in the 60s. We only got that in about the year 2000 or so, 2001, I believe, 2002. It was at that point where desktop computers finally broke the gigahertz barrier, and it became something that you could now buy as a common electronics. But the NSA had that in the 1960s. Let's see here. By the way, none of the supposed flights, American Airlines Flight 11, a Boeing 767 traveling from Boston to Los Angeles, United Airlines Flight 175, a Boeing 767 traveling from Boston to Los Angeles, American Airlines Flight 77, a Boeing 757 traveling from Dulles to Los Angeles, and United Airlines Flight 93, a Boeing 757 traveling from Newark to San Francisco. You know what's very interesting as well is that those numbers were never retired. So the tail numbers of those planes remained in use after those planes supposedly were destroyed. So let's talk about this. None of those planes had a full manifest. Technically, if you had combined all the passengers from each of those planes, they would fill one plane. Keep that in mind. Some of the passengers, very few passengers were listed on the Social Security Death Index, the ones on this manifest, or on the manifests. Supposedly, a plane was reported at crashing near the Ohio-Kentucky border that day. And black boxes that were created specifically so they can't be destroyed. Apparently, every single one of those 4 black boxes were destroyed, and none of that information could come out. By the way, it's specifically Flight 93 and 175 whose registration numbers are still valid years after 9/11. Now, if we take a look at Boeing, for example, they've been able to have their planes remotely controlled since the 1970s. So it doesn't take much imagination to understand that it's quite easy if you understand the technology and you have access to the tools necessary to basically take control of a flight and to have it fly wherever you want. I can't remember his name, maybe someone can remind me. There was a U.S. senator who, strangely enough, his private plane decompressed and autopilot continued to fly, and this was, I believe, in 2000, they scrambled jet fighters to intercept it, and they weren't able to communicate, but they could see that they were unconscious inside. Eventually, the plane, used up all its fuel, and it eventually crashed. Tiff says, I have also heard the government is actually 100 years ahead of us when it comes to technology, that they slowly release the technology a little at a time. No, that is exactly the fact. I don't know exactly if it's 100 years, but they are at least 50 years ahead. And that is, just one example is the CPUs, the gigahertz and such. There's a lot of other technologies, for example, solar power, nuclear fission. They actually have small nuclear fission reactors that can power, a city block and stuff, and they don't need to be serviced or anything like that. And I remember it was Missouri senator, apparently, Derailed says. But yeah, this technology, they tried to implement it in Canada. They tried to bring it in, and they didn't want like it would take too much power away from the generation companies and such. But that's just another example. Cars that run on water, Tesla towers. There's numerous number of technologies that we only see a slight percentage of, and even still, it's not anywhere close to the power that it could be, or at least the ones that the government is using. But without getting too bogged down on that, let's see what else here. Let's keep talking about those calls. So the calls themselves actually do sound very robotic. Some of them do. Some of them sound like these people are being coerced. And it's obviously we have to remove the possibility that it was recorded in the air. So it had to have been on the ground. And even at this point, and this is, thank you for bringing me back, circling back. This is where the technology conversation comes into play. Remember, the NSA is years beyond us with technology. When I tell you that they have the ability to essentially recreate your voice, if you say a phrase, right? You say a phrase to a computer and it records your voice. It's a specific phrase that they give you that is supposed to take all the different enunciations that you have and mannerisms and essentially reduce it into an algorithm. What happens then? They now can type in a sentence or a phrase and have your voice speak it. In fact, they can actually make it so that, how can I put this? You're on a conversation with somebody, but you're muted, but you're speaking into the phone, which is then being routed to this machine, the voice changing machine, which then changes your voice to that of whoever you choose. So you can essentially have a real-time conversation with somebody with a totally different voice. And in fact, it doesn't even require a human. It could be done solely with an AI. So these recordings definitely were manipulated, to say the least. And they were definitely recorded on the ground. Let's go to the next one here. We've talked obviously about the connection between bin Laden and the Bush families. We know that bin Laden had been trained and funded by the CIA. He fought with the Mujahideen of Afghanistan. And he actually did come to America multiple times under the name of Tim Osman. He shaved his beard, everything. He was a very westernized individual. But when it came to doing the job that the CIA needed, well, they got somebody that filled the role of a Islamicist. He dressed the role and everything, and they gave him all the necessary tools to fight the Soviets in Afghanistan. And we have evidence that Zbigniew Brzezinski, foreign policy advisor, I believe, of Nixon and other, Carter, Nixon, and other individuals. He apparently is one of the co-founders of Trilateral. And yeah, I can show you guys these photos. Yeah, I'll do that. Actually, yeah, hold on. I just want to pick the best photo so that you guys can see his face. Because also there's predictive programming. which I want to get to. I believe Travis is still here, so he might be able to address this as well. But let me just bring this picture up. Okay, so on the left we've got Zbigniew Brzezinski. On the right we have purportedly Osama bin Laden. Now, I don't know if Tiff is still here, but yeah, Tim Osman actually was a CIA, not supposedly, he was. There's documentation that proves this, all the connections there. He was paid by the CIA, the documents prove it. And yeah, that was just his name that he was provided as a cover to operate in North America. But yeah, basically, if you remember the movie Casino Royale, and the one that came after, I can't remember which one it was, the character of Mr. White looks identical to, or very, very similar to Zbigniew Brzezinski. And Brzezinski was a money guy and involved in, you know, shenanigans and back room deals and stuff. And so was Mr. White. There's a reason why they put this in front of our face. So let's continue here. Well, it's funny that Tiff says this. She says, still dumb they didn't show photos of bin Laden's body because they didn't want to offend the Muslims. Well, here's the thing. There's been dozens of photos that have come out that supposedly showed bin Laden dead. In a very gruesome way, but they're all proven fake. And those came out prior to the supposed raid, I believe it was in Jalalabad, where that secret team with a stealth chopper went and supposedly assassinated Osama bin Laden. And that was SEAL Team 6, by the way. And by the way, every single one of them died in a helicopter explosion in Afghanistan soon after. Cleaning up those loose ends now. But that helicopter, the stealth helicopter, there's several that went to that raid. They one of them crashed, and the Pakistanis invited the Chinese to come and inspect the goods. So they came and they took their tests and all that stuff. They got some more American technology without actually stealing it this time. And yeah, these are the black helicopters that have been supposedly reported for ages, you know, going around cattle mutilation sites. So these helicopters practically can't be heard. They are these black helicopters that the supposed conspiracy theorists have been talking for so long. Yeah, they exist. But obviously, that was another cover, Tiff, about not wanting to offend the Muslims, because by that point they'd already released at least 12 different photos of bin Laden being killed and showing, you know, a mutilated body and stuff. And, well, we got also all those news reports, and we've got politicians who also confirmed that they were told Osama bin Laden is dead. He died here, or we killed him here. Here's a photo. Here's this. All proven fake. The story that has probably the closest semblance of reality is the one that he died in Dubai. Going there, you know, it was, by the way, it was a military hospital. And he was visited by CIA operatives. But he died there because of kidney failure. So let's just continue here. By the way, it's not bin Laden, but Zbigniew Brzezinski, who supposedly formed Al-Qaeda. And Al-Qaeda, depending on who you ask, either means the base, the cell. I think Awandi is here, so he can give us, because he is coming from the home of Islam. So he can tell us, you know, what is the proper definition. But it's a Western creation, is what it is. And it was funded by the West, and it was something that they have always had their intelligence operatives working with, so they could easily utilize them whenever they need to. By the way, Bush signed Directive W199I, which apparently pulled the FBI off bin Laden's trail. Also, you got to understand, well, I'm sure you do, but I'm sure we all recognize that normally when a crime occurs, there's some time that's taken to conduct an investigation prior to naming a potential suspect. Within probably minutes, they were already saying it was Osama bin Laden. It's funny because what was it? The Taliban actually publicly came out after this happened and said, if he's really guilty of this, provide us with the evidence and we'll arrest him. This is different. Like, Taliban is different from Al Qaeda. But they said, yeah, if he's guilty, we'll hand him over to you guys. And obviously that never occurred. There was a few journalists that were actually able to make it into, I think it was Pakistan in the 2000s, to interview bin Laden. And yeah, they asked him about actually, I can't remember. I've got to look into that. But I do remember that prior to the event, because he had been named this big boogeyman, these American and foreign journalists were somehow able to get an interview with the guy, and bin Laden is basically saying, yeah, the Americans are accusing me of all this stuff, but I'm not responsible for, like, again, the coal and the Nairobi and Tanzania embassy explosions, these other attacks and stuff. He was saying, I'm not responsible for this. They're obviously trying to frame me and stuff. But it's quite clear that this was set up to create the boogeyman, and they had years of planning for this. Tiff says, Dave, do you remember the cartoon that went viral, Hey Mr. Taliban, Turn Over Bin Laden, featuring George Bush playing the bongos and Colin Powell on the microphone? No, I don't remember. Speaking of November 2001, that's the date that Bill Cooper got murdered by the U.S. government. Bill Cooper wrote a book called Behold a Pale Horse. I suggest you read it. I've got a copy if you'd like. A digital copy I can send you. And he laid everything out that's going on now in his book. And he had a podcast going on through the 2000s and obviously in 2001. And he actually warned about this. And he did it way before Alex Jones did. And, well, in November 2001, he and his family got murdered. Waco style. Or Ruby Ridge style. So, if you want to learn about somebody who has laid it out as to how it's going to happen, read that book. Let's see. So Al Qaeda did not come. What's it called? No, that's not. Sorry, wrong thing. We talked about that. So I'm just going through my list here. Oh yeah, there was a apparent in November 2001 an apparent bin Laden confession that came out, but it was obviously fake. We know that Was it? Sorry, I'm getting distracted here with messages. My apologies. Oh yeah. So okay. So fake videos there. We know they're fake. I guess I got to close to the end of that. Okay. All right, so back to the chat quickly. Looks like only Tiff is active. Just a reminder, you can call in if you want something to say, if you want to speak your mind. I encourage you. The Skype lines are open. I've been talking for close to 2 hours now. I could use a little bit of a break. And it would be nice to interact with somebody who would like to discuss their suspicions or perhaps their thoughts on the matter. So let me go back to here. Before we go on with this, does anyone want to put in the chat what they think happened? What they think went down? I just want to go back to the chat. I'm surprised. I would have thought people would call in. I mean, considering that people were asking me to do this show and to cover all this stuff, I actually did think that somebody was going to call in. But okay. All right, what else? Well, obviously, let's just go straight to talking what did happen. It's obviously that a coup occurred, a coup that was planned, that was well known, and held a lot of esoteric meaning. Remember that September 11th actually is the anniversary day that the winged hussars of the Polish king helped repel the invasion of Vienna and essentially ensure that from that point on there would be no further successful incursions into Europe by the forces of the Ottoman Empire, or the caliphate that existed prior, and then the Ottoman Empire. And essentially had stopped over 1,000 years of incursions from Islamic countries invading Europe. So, as an esoteric meaning to try to place a sort of spell on this sort of thing, and try to push this narrative. They're trying to relate it to the conflict between Islam and Christianity. But it's clear that there was obviously all this operational planning, and that all these different intelligence organizations, whether it be the CIA, the DIA, MI6, the Mossad, the SES, all were involved. And people think, oh, well, how could there be this massive conspiracy and no one know about it? It's called compartmentalization. So if the boss at the top of the pyramid is the only one who knows all the info, and they talk to another boss at the top of the pyramid, well, all their separate employees aren't going to know what's happening, but those two bosses are involved in moving and shaking and allowing for things to occur. What did 9/11 do? It helped create this new war on terror, or war of terror, and it helped essentially push for what the Project for a New American Century wanted, which was to balkanize the Middle East, to create constant conflict on secular and ethnic lines, and to cause chaos so that they couldn't unite and hold off American, globalism, basically. So Iraq was always, you know, in the crosshairs, but they needed to immediately address the outrage that the nation felt. So they decided, well, we can make some pipelines in Afghanistan as well, and there's a lot of rare earth minerals there too. So let's do that. Plus, we can get nice and close to Russia and nice and close to China, and basically, you know, create another great event for the military-industrial complex, which will make them money for years on end. And then, obviously, it opened up the door to weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. Oh no, not the ones we sold them. No. Ignore those. No, the weapons of mass destruction, the supposed nuclear weapons that they would have if Israel hadn't bombed their reactor in 1983. But are we really going to believe that? But that's the whole thing, is that Iraq posed a big threat to Israel as being a economic powerhouse and a military powerhouse of that region as well. And, well, they couldn't have them standing in the way. So Saddam Hussein, who had kept a very diverse group of ethnicities under control in the borders of a British-created Iraq, they basically destroyed that and created Sunni versus Shia and Kurdish and other groups to start infighting and create the chaos that now stands there. And the millions of people that died and the countless number of irreplaceable, priceless antiquities that were either stolen or destroyed, to me, is probably one of the biggest crimes against humanity that we've ever witnessed. And it's heart-wrenching to consider how much history has been lost because of these senseless wars. Iraq, after all, was known, because it's part of Mesopotamia, as the cradle of civilization. The oldest known cities were discovered there. So back to the chat. Let's see. Nobody else talking. That's interesting. I'm very curious now. Maybe I just won't do any more of these types of shows because people are constantly like, you know, Inspector Todd saying you got to do more of these videos of Derek Hans, but where's the interaction? Where's the, you know, interest? I mean, we've lost viewers. We had 17, 18 viewers. Now we're down to 11. It's only Tiff who's talking right now. It's 5 in the afternoon, so people mostly at this time, when I'm doing other streams, are available. So I'm going to have to consider doing any additional videos, not because of the views, but it's because of the interaction, because that's what people asked me to do. They wanted to interact with this. They wanted to hear this. They wanted to get my take on it, and well, that's what I did. But okay, I'll keep that in mind. I'm not too sure what else I could cover. I mean, I could literally talk about this for hours, but you know, is there really a need to? The information is already out there. There's dozens of different documentaries that provide great footage, very high quality footage of this event. A lot of great research done by people, and obviously in a much more organized manner than what I'm presenting here today. But you can find that out as well. So let's see here. how am I going to do this? Okay. Well, I mean, I think I've reached the end of it. I mean, there's not much else I can discuss. Obviously, it was an operation that was conducted by multiple intelligence organizations throughout the world. They all worked in conjunction with each other, and again, with the compartmentalization, they are able to keep people in the shadows or keep them quiet, and then essentially initiate their plans. So you don't need a whole team of people to understand this. You need select few. And in the end, if these people all agree with the same purpose, the same end result, well, they're going to do so. I mean, how many people kept quiet about Weinstein, about Epstein, about Oprah, about all these other people? Well, if they're benefiting and they live a life of evil, 1,000 deaths is just a statistic to them. So 3,000, they don't even blink. And, well, since they send thousands of people to die in wars, you know, what's a few thousand more? But we've been lied to. And for those who just can't struggle to get beyond that fact, despite it being 20 years since that event, really need to wake up and mature, because the evidence is blatant and right in your face, and it can't be ignored. So, on that note, I'm going to go for another few minutes. Maybe somebody wants to call in. And let's see, we got Derek in the chat says, if I wasn't in the Adirondacks right now, I'd definitely call in. My stream keeps buffering. Service here is atrocious. You should be just enjoying the fucking hike, not fucking watching streams. He says, oh, he said it 3 times. Okay. Bam says, if you have the facts and press hard, you end up dead. Yeah. Or, you know, in some sort of trouble. Channel gets deleted, video gets deleted, mystery, whatever. But that's the thing, though. I'm not presenting anything new, really. And there's really bigger fish than me. But, yeah, there's a lot of information out there that's just very evident, very blatant. And all it takes is a little bit of courage to look at it. If you can't get over the fact that the government is more than willing to not only lie to you, but to poison you, well then, again, you need to wake up. But it's quite evident. I mean, false flags have been used, hopefully we're going to, I shouldn't have said that, but those types of events, curious events, have been used for a long time. I mean, the Gulf of Tonkin, for example, that essentially initiated the Vietnam War, never occurred. So there's many instances that that prove that there is a precedent for people in elite positions to take control of a situation, because never let what's that term again? Never let a crisis go to waste. So, I guess on that note, I'm going to sign off. Thank you for joining us here today for Darker Things, 20 Years of Lies. Hope you have a great day. And good night.